and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistan, being the front-line ally in the war on terror, won the decisive war, although Pakistan had to pay a huge price in this regard. But Pakistan's efforts to eliminate the scourge of terrorism had been widely recognized and acknowledged. At the same time, Pakistan also played a pivotal role in the Afghan peace and reconciliation efforts and making the United States and the Afghan Taliban to come to the negotiating table, which resulted in the signing of the historic Doha peace deal. Both the sides, the US as well as the Afghan Taliban, made certain commitments in that particular deal, and the most important commitment which was made by the Afghan Taliban was not to allow the Afghan soil to be used against any other country. Let me quote what was there in the declaration. The Islamic Republic of Afghanistan furthermore reaffirms its ongoing commitment to prevent any international terrorist groups or individuals, including Al-Qaeda and ISIS Khorasan, from using Afghan soil to threaten the security of the United States, its allies, and other countries. Similarly, there were certain other commitments which were made by the United States. Now, as I have already mentioned, that Pakistan won a decisive war against terrorism, but recently we have seen there has been a rise in certain insurgent attacks and terrorist attacks in Pakistan, particularly when we talk about the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. And since the Taliban had made the commitment, and there were certain imprints which point towards that these terrorist incidents and the insurgent attacks were taking place from across the border from the Afghanistan side. And this particular issue had been raised multiple times with the Pakistani authorities towards the interim Afghan government led by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, most recently, 6 law enforcers were martyred in Lucky Marwat when militants attacked a police van, and 2 soldiers were martyred in an exchange of fire in Bajour district in a separate incident. Regarding a Lucky Marwat incident and also the other incident, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif categorically condemned this heinous terrorist attack and said the entire nation stood firm with the unbreakable resolve against terrorism. What is actually keeping the Afghan Taliban that the Afghan soil is still being used against other countries, especially when we talk about Pakistan, despite their clear-cut commitment in the Doha peace deal? I will be talking to our panelists. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. He is expert foreign affairs. Mr. Jaspal, thank you very much for your time, for being at Views on News. We really appreciate your time. And on Skype, we are being joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan. He is former president, National Defense University. Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan, thank you very much for your time, also for being on Views on News. We really appreciate that. And we're also being joined on Skype by Mr. Hassan Khan. He is expert Afghan affairs. Mr. Hassan Khan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Jaspal. Do you think the Afghan Taliban are keeping up with the commitment they made in the Doha peace deal of not letting the Afghan soil to be used against any other country? And if not, what do you think is keeping them from keeping that commitment?
My understanding is that theoretically maybe, practically not. Because this Taliban made a commitment that Afghan soil will be not used against any country. And unfortunately now once soil is used against Pakistan even, which is one of the biggest ally of the Taliban, and we are working for them for de jure to, from de facto to de jure government in that context.
Afghan Taliban, not the Taliban, because
No, Afghan Taliban.
Afghan Taliban.
And we only requested them that they can tame this Taliban. And what happened in Lucky Marwat, Bajour, and the other parts of the Pakistan, that is not acceptable. Pakistani government has to now take a clear stance in a manner that how they can look towards the Taliban government in Afghanistan, because we have been treating in the last 1 year them not a de facto but a de jure government, but they fail to perform. If they fail to perform to Pakistan, how we can sell their legitimacy to the rest of the world? That is the biggest challenge. Second point is that if you see in the newspapers, it's very obvious. Since the last 4 days, Chaman border is closed. What they are looking? What is their rate? If the Afghan Taliban, I mean the Taliban government in Afghanistan failed to establish a rate in Afghanistan, then the question is that who is there? Al Qaeda or Daesh, XYZ. So I think that the Afghans are still living with the same mindset. And this mindset, I'm sorry to say it, that blackmail Pakistan by giving them reference to the India, which the Taliban also gave, or let them do solve, but they have to think about it.
Well, Dr. Jaspal, don't you think that the kind of efforts the Pakistani authorities have been making over the years and categorically saying that Pakistan is always advocating peace and stability in Afghanistan, and the kind of role Pakistan played in bringing the Afghan Taliban to the negotiating table that helped in the withdrawal of the international forces from Afghanistan, don't you think the realization does exist when it comes to the Afghan Taliban?
That's my point when I feel very bad. That why the Afghan Taliban is not realizing this, that we suffered more than them or equally, and we did all those efforts by virtue of today they are the rulers in Afghanistan. Why they are not ensuring at least our border should be secure, and why they are blackmailing us? This is a question.
Let me bring in General Raza. General Raza, do you think the Afghan Taliban, do you agree with what Dr. Jaspal had just pointed out, that they haven't practically been able to keep up to that commitment they made in the Doha peace deal? Do you think there are certain limitations to the Afghan Taliban that they couldn't keep up to that commitment, and letting the Afghan soil being used particularly against Pakistan, who helped them to negotiate with the international forces and sign that historic Doha peace deal?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, I agree with Dr. Jaspal in what he says. And to that, I'd like to add that, terrorism inside Pakistan has always been influenced by external dynamics and some internal inadequacies. When you look at what has happened in the province of KP in the last 1 year, I think there have been more than 60 terrorist attacks, and I think in those attacks, hundreds of people have been either, martyred or injured. Looking at the reasons, we know that terrorists from Afghanistan are there. They are being trained there. They are facilitated. They are funded, probably, by RAW and probably by others inside Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is a safe haven sanctuary for TTP, BLA, BLF. Many of the missing persons, about which we keep hearing in Pakistan, they are being trained there. Unfortunately, one cannot be sure about two things. One is the capacity of the Afghan Taliban government, whether it is still there or it is not there. There is a question mark on that. But more important than that is the will of that government. And I think even that is not in sight. And if both these things are lacking, then there is certainly a problem, and I think that needs to be taken up with the Afghan government by Pakistan. Coming back, to the internal inadequacies, I think the government of KP, it needs to first of all carry out an internal security audit to find out, what are the reasons. Why there are so many incidents there? Are they taking enough or adequate support from the federations and in that from the intelligence agencies or not? The provincial counter-terrorism departments of the police were supposed to be actually strengthened and funded as per the National Action Plan. But I don't think that that has happened, whether in KP or in any other province. So that is actually a big weakness. At the same time, I think there is a requirement of now releasing the NFC award, 1 or 3% of the NFC award, which was promised to the to the former uh, FATA areas, which are now under the KP. They need to be given that money so that the police departments there they can be strengthened. And without that, I think it will be very difficult, to control the terrorist activities there. At the same time, we know that there are the internal financer sympathizers and facilitators in Pakistan, and I think it is basically now the responsibility of the provincial government, because after the 18th Amendment, law and order is the responsibility of the provincial government. The federation is always there to help and support them. So if the terrorism is happening, in the urban areas, then I think the police is the best department to find out, all their facilitators, their financiers, and their sympathizers, because these things cannot be done alone, or it can't be done through a solo effort. So we must concentrate on that. And of course, intelligence-based operations needs to be undertaken by the provincial as well as the federal agencies, so that this is finished. All terrorists living in Afghanistan near the border areas, I think we need to take care of them one way or the other. And again, until that is done, these things will continue.
General Raza, your point is well taken. A very pertinent point that you have raised regarding the capacity of the law enforcement agencies when it comes to the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There are certain things which have been said by KP IGP Mr. Moazzam Jansari. I'll bring those comments by him after this particular incident. I'll take your opinion on that one as well. Mr. Hassan Khan, when we talk about the Taliban's commitment made in the Doha peace deal, do you think there are immense challenges for the Afghan Taliban that they couldn't keep up to that very commitment of not allowing the Afghan soil to be used against any country, and for that matter against Pakistan in particular?
Thank you very much, Jawad, and my salam to General Saab and Dr. Jaspal Saab. And I think both General Saab and Dr. Saab has rightly pointed out the issue, especially with the Afghan Taliban and the terrorist or the law and order situation in Pakhtunkhwa. I think if we see, Pakistan has already expressed its concern in the current Moscow process, which is currently going on in Moscow. Pakistan representative Sadiq Khan has rightly said that Afghanistan, the Taliban, it is a story of unmet expectations. It's not only, I think, clearing the footprints of the terrorist group in Afghanistan. They also, I think, failed to do the other promises like inclusive government. So far, they are flatly refusing to, because Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic society. So definitely, it's not only the one ethnic group. Whenever the one ethnic groups dominate, so definitely the other ethnic groups, they feel alienated. So the same, you see, Taliban are taking, instead of facilitating the women and girls, they are further shrinking the space for women and girls. Previously, they just stopped them from going to schools and colleges and universities, and now they say public parks and public places are denied to them, and it means that women has only one place, and that is, as said, in our areas, especially in the tribal society, that it is only a home or a grave for a woman. There's only two places. Either she has to be at home or she has to be in grave. And this is what the policies of the current Taliban government. And again, another important thing is about this issue of terrorist networks in Afghanistan. It's not only the TTP, which is currently thriving in Afghanistan. Look at the Chaman incidents. In the Chaman incidents, the attacker was reportedly facilitated by the Afghan Taliban security boy who were guarding on that side of the border, and now they are denying giving that person to the Pakistan government. So I think you look. Uzbekistan, there is the INU Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan's people are there. ETIM, they are there. The Chinese terrorists, the China has its own concern there. Al Qaeda is there, Ayman al-Zawahiri was targeted in a very posh locality in Afghanistan. So I think having any expectation from Taliban that either they will fulfill their promises which they made at the Doha, I think it will be too naive for Pakistan. And even
Mr. Hassan Khan, beg your pardon for the interjection. So what remains to be the option? They are the reality. They are controlling the largest swathe of Afghanistan. So they are responsible for the security, and security has been the first and the foremost concern of the international forces as well as the regional countries bordering Afghanistan. So what remains to be the solution? You can't conceive of an idea of putting the boots on ground by the international forces once again. We have seen the 2 decades and the horrors of that war already.
I think this is $1 million question, and especially we, the regional countries, whether it is Pakistan, Iran, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, or Tajikistan, really we are caught. It's a typical catch-22 situation. You have to deal with them because they are the de facto ruler of Afghanistan. But on the other side, look at their attitude. We, Pakistan and the regional countries, are pushing the world not to push Taliban into an isolation, because this pushing them into isolation will be too dangerous. But on the other side, Taliban's own policy I think, they are pulling them into isolation. Look at the recent edict, the verdict of the Amir Mullah Haibatullah, who has again said that the Taliban of the 90s, the policy of the 90s, where the strict punishment like cutting off the limbs, cutting off the what you call it, execution, etc., they have to be reintroduced. So I think this is even the regional countries have nothing common. What to do with Afghanistan? The international community is clueless. The reason is that at the moment nobody is supporting a military solution, further military actions in Afghanistan. Even inside Afghanistan, the NRF, National Resistance Movement, even they are not finding any support in the international community. The reason is international community feel that let the Afghan solve this issue, because Afghan has a very peculiar psyche. So this question that what's the solution at the moment? Personally, if you ask me, unfortunately, I am seeing Afghanistan further. I think it is descending into another decade of chaos, and that is its future. Because look at the way Taliban are behaving for the last 1 year. In Afghanistan, the space is shrink not only for women but for every Afghan. Every Afghan wants just to run away from the country. So I think it's a very tough question. And
Mr. Hassan Khan, your point is well taken, very pertinently. You've mentioned 2 points, that it wouldn't be a good idea to isolate Afghanistan at this critical juncture, as well as the international community, which was led by the US, who fought war for 2 decades there in Afghanistan. They also made certain commitments in that Doha peace deal. I'll be talking about that, but right after a short break. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Views on News. We're discussing why the Afghan Taliban were unable to keep to the commitment they made in the Doha peace deal. And we are joined by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal in the studio. On Skype, we are joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan and also Mr. Hassan Khan. So, Dr. Jaspal, as Mr. Hassan Khan said that it wouldn't be a good idea to isolate Afghanistan at this particular critical juncture when the Afghan people themselves are faced with dire economic and humanitarian challenge after the 20 years of war. And at the same time, he also alluded to the fact that the international community, especially the US, wants the Afghan people themselves to set a direction for themselves. So what's your take? Because there's certain commitments by the US also in the Doha peace deal, how the US can impress upon the Afghan Taliban to uphold to those commitments.
I concur what Hassan said is correct. We cannot isolate the Afghanistan today. But at the same time, I'm skeptical about the United States policy. Americans promised with the Afghan Taliban and Doha agreement that they assist them to stabilize the situation. If you see, to date, Americans failed to release their funds as well. On the one side, they signed an agreement which started last year and then completed. On the other side, the American strategic conclave still feels they must fail. That's the reason Americans are not releasing their legitimate funds. This is one point. Second is, and as a student of strategic study, that is my assumption, why Americans want stability in Afghanistan? If you just have a look on the global strategic environment and keeping in mind 4 documents which were released from the United States Defense Department, Nuclear Posture Review XYZ, they mentioned China, number 1 threat, and the Russia as a part of it. Terrorism, low intensity conflict or sub-conventional conflict is not there. If we keep in that mind, their desire to Afghanistan continue to be an unstable state, an area for a proxy wars. Because if today they give the full, whatever the Afghans have their reserves, maybe there will be stability. If there will be stability, then there will be no space for Fatima or Zenobian Brigade. There will be no space for the Al-Qaeda or Daesh. There will be no space for the East Timor movement or Uzbek Islamic movement. If America is in a strategic competition with the US and with the China and Russia, why they permit it? Secondly, for us it's very important, with the Arslan and Jaspal were referring it, stability in Afghanistan spill over stability in Pakistan. But unfortunately, we were expecting for the Afghan Taliban a lot of favors. What is happening? They instead of preferring Pakistan, they are preferring their ideological commitment with Tehrik-e-Taliban. Today, my research indicates if Afghan Taliban stop supporting Pakistan Tehrik-e-Taliban, they will not perform anything here. And if you see what happened in Lakimabad, the 6 policemen, Bajo, 2 FC soldiers were martyred, and luckily in the DG Khan, 4 Tehrik-e-Taliban were killed in these are in the 1 week incidents. So Afghan Taliban are failing to refrain them. So, and the worst thing is, what I wish to draw your attention, Chaman border. In the Chaman border, since 4 years, there is deadlock. Who killed my soldier? Somebody who shot. Why Afghan Taliban failed to check it? That means they're somewhere.
So that, Dr. Jaspal, that raises the question on 2 fronts regarding that very lack of capacity when it comes to the Afghan Taliban of governing such a huge territory and controlling all those terrorist groups. Also, their commitment more towards what their ideology is, as you already mentioned.
No, my understanding is different. I say, when you say lack of capacity, maybe Afghan Taliban has a lack of capacity in the northern side, with Tajik Uzbeks. But on our side, in the southern side, in the Pashtun areas, no, they don't have a lack of capacity. They have a lack of will.
So that calls for a better border management for that.
No,
side.
we are doing.
From the Afghan Taliban side.
They are not doing. Because we have to go for the ontological of this issue, which people miss it. In Kabul, Pashtun's regime, survival is based on Lashkars historically from our tribal areas. But now the question is, are they thinking in that lines? Their survival in tribal area is based on the TTP? No. Because we have put the wire, they are destroying it. So we have to be very clear. The government of Pakistan has to make it very clear with the TTP, Taliban Pakistan or Taliban government. We are here to support you to move from de facto to zero sphere, but please deliver. And I personally feel what happened on the last 4 days on the Chaman border, it's bleeding us, not bleeding them.
Right. General Raza, what's your take? It raises questions regarding the capacity of the Afghan Taliban, at the same time their own commitment towards their own ideology. Perhaps there are certain limitations with the Afghan Taliban when it comes to them gaining that very legitimacy among the local population as well. At the same time, they're faced with the challenge of ISIS, Khorasan, as well as other terrorist and insurgent groups over there.
I talked about their capacity as well as their will, that we find that both are actually lacking. And it may be true, that in the north, they actually don't need, substantial forces, but I think they need to have those at the Pak-Afghan border. Number one. Number two, I think all the crossing points, formal as well as informal, between Afghanistan and Pakistan, we need to increase our vigilance at them. And I think all movement from now onwards needs to be better scrutinized. Whether, it is the Afghan traders who are crossing, and we know that they cross daily in thousands, or whether there are Pakistanis, coming from Afghanistan to Pakistan. At all the checkpoints, we must increase our vigilance to ensure that no terrorists can enter. Secondly, I think inside Afghanistan, both the government of Afghanistan and Pakistan must make concerted effort to prevent the nexus, of all those terrorist groups there, which I named earlier, that is the TPP, BLA, BLF, some raw agent, ETIM, and all that. Because if they form a nexus there, it is going to be a problem for not only Pakistan and Afghanistan, but the entire neighborhood of Afghanistan, and therefore I think that is very important, that there is coordination, intelligence sharing on that, and that nexus is not allowed to form, or if it is there, that nexus must be effectively broken. Then, of course, inside Pakistan, I think there are issues that, the attention or the focus of the counter-terrorism agencies, whether it is the police or others, that is actually now diverted towards the political instability, which is very, very unfortunate. And I think in these environments, the terrorists, they actually get a more fertile ground to do what they want to do. So I think the government and all the political parties needs to be cognizant of that. There needs to be concern needs to be shown, and the politicians, across the political divide in their own areas, they need to raise, these issues, the concerns, and make sure that the civil society takes part, active part, and help and assist all the law enforcement agencies in, informing these people, their sympathizers, their financiers and supporters. And once that is done, I think we will be able to control, if not totally eliminate, the terrorism, whether it is in KP or Balochistan or in other parts of the country.
Right, General Raza, what I understand from your take is that due to the political instability prevalent right now in Pakistan, the resources have to be diverted in order to deal with that political instability, and that gives a sort of a room to the terrorist outfits to operate freely for that matter. So you mean that the politics of agitation shouldn't be followed, and all the stakeholders should look for the larger national interest? Am I right?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, these incidents are happening, and, there is this political agitations also going on. If you recall, in 2014, again, there was this kind of an instability, and the incidents of the APS happened because the attention and focus of the law enforcement agencies was in another direction. And probably nowadays the same is happening, and these terrorists have realized this. And because, as I said earlier, they are externally trained and directed, and therefore they know, that where is the vacuum, in which areas is the vacuum, or where is the weaknesses, and they go for the weaknesses. So I think the earlier that this political instability ends, the better it would be for counter-terrorism operations of the LEAs, who are actually every day laying down their lives to protect the people of Pakistan, and that is applicable now in all the provinces.
Right, General Raza, your point is well taken. A very pertinent point you've highlighted. We'll be continuing the discussion, and we'll take a short break. After we return from the break, we'll be talking to Mr. Hassan Khan and the kind of landscape over there we locally see in Afghanistan, and the kind of measures the Afghan Taliban have taken over there. We'll be talking about this, but right after this short break. Stay tuned.
Name is Maruf Hamid.
Welcome back to Views on News. So, Mr. Hassan Khan, when we talk about the kind of measures Afghan Taliban have taken there after taking over Afghanistan over the last 1 year, particularly, there are certain reports and papers which suggest that the landscape had been a little different this time around, because they've changed their force posture also, which has visibly relaxed across much of the country. Checkpoints on roads and highways have been dismantled. Now, do you think, is it because they want to gain the legitimacy among the local population, and that is also causing that very vacuum for such elements, the terrorist or insurgent elements, to go through those particular checkpoints which were already in place there?
I think as for the Taliban, I think for the last more than a year now, their only target is to consolidate their position. And now they are reverting to implement their own strict, what you call it, a tribal Islam or a totally tribal Afghan culture, even in Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan. But let me talk one thing about the situation in KP, because the situation in Afghanistan, definitely it is affecting the situation in KP, and definitely with the KP is that the line order situation, definitely the rest of Pakistan cannot be secured. The problem is we are talking of, yes, Afghanistan is an issue. But unfortunately, if I say when Rome was burning, what Nehru was doing, the same is here in Pakistan. Look, in KP, daily we are listening to a terrorist attack from Bajawar in the north to the Lucky in south, and D.I. Khan, etc., in Waziristan. People in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa are staging big marches. Look at the big march, 2-day march in Waziristan. Look at the people coming out against the terrorists and these people in Malakan division, in Bajawar, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But Jawad, tell me, we are sitting in Islamabad. Are we realizing? Look at your national media. Is our national media is giving any coverage to the situation, to the
Mr. Hassan Khan, don't you think that raises the question regarding the capacity and the capability of the provincial government in particular?
Our political, it is the story of a stolen watch. It is more important than the killing of 6 policemen and 2 soldiers in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And look at the story
Mr.
of
Hassan Khan, beg your pardon for the interruption. Don't you think this raises the question regarding the capability and the capacity of the provincial government when especially it has come under the ambit of the provincial government to deal with the law and order situation in their own province? And there are certain media reports which suggest that the KP police personnel have been deployed in order to facilitate the kind of agitation the party that is governing that province is concerned.
Look, I think you are right as for the line order situation, but this is not a line order situation. This is terrorism. These are acts of terrorism, and it needs a clear policy on part of the state. It is not only the kinetic operation that you send the military units or you send the police officer and who fought there. Our police officer, Jawan and officer, our military Jawan and officer and the security operators, they are offering their lives. But look at on the other side.
They're offering their life at the same time, Mr. Hassan Khan, at the same time over the last 2 decades. We have seen that Pakistani security forces and law enforcement agencies have sacrificed their lives. And as you already mentioned, they are sacrificing continuously for the security of the motherland. Now, what exactly do you think should be done? Because if a certain infiltration is happening despite Pakistan putting the border fence over there, trying to manage the border, but the fighting from across the border happens, so there must be something which should be done on the Afghan side of the border rather than more that needs to be done on this side?
Look, I think it shall be a two-pronged strategy. One on the Afghan side, I think we need to give a clear message to the Taliban. And I think this preferential treatment along Pakistan-Afghan border, I think it should be disbanded. One must have a clear Afghan policy that it is an Afghanistan is Afghanistan and Pakistan is Pakistan. These are two countries, and we need to deal with Afghanistan as a country like we are dealing with Iran, like we are dealing with any other country. I think this preferential things with Afghanistan, that we always, whenever we are talking of Afghanistan, we get some emotional, even our experts, even our political leaders, whenever they are talking about Afghanistan, they get a sort of emotional. I think this policy of getting emotional vis-a-vis Afghanistan should be shut away. Let's treat Afghanistan as a country, and one must have a clear policy about the cross-border terrorism from Afghanistan. inside, I think we also need a clear policy.
Mr. Hassan
So
Khan,
far, we don't
your
have
point
a
is well
policy
taken,
how
but
to deal with
clearly there
the
happens to be an emotional
presidency.
side to this particular thing as well, because we see a lot of families on both sides of the border, on the Afghanistan side, also on Pakistan side, and the refugee problem Pakistan has been dealing with over the last many years. Dr. Jaspal, do you agree with what Mr. Hassan Khan has just pointed out?
No, Hassan Khan is trying to give you this message that Pakistan has to be very careful about its own national interest. In the last 4 decades, Pakistan has tried to ignore its own national interest and try to preserve the Afghans' interest. I mean refugees, I mean Afghan Taliban.
On the humanitarian grounds.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. It's not a wrong thing. I'm not condemning the government of Pakistan or 4 decades. But time has now come that Pakistani decision makers have to realize Afghanistan is a sovereign independent state and Pakistan is equally. Pakistan will prosper only to treat the Afghans as an Afghan government or Afghan people rather than as a part of Pakistan.
Right, thank you very
And
much,
we have to strengthen what in the last this, and I think we are on a right track. We put the wire on the border.
The border fencing.
And I think in the last few years, the government of Pakistan did a good thing by border management. So this is the only answer to all your question. If the government of Pakistan in the coming days succeed in managing the border, infiltration control, and these Afghans who are just moving here and they are not brothers. They are Afghans. We have to treat them as Afghan. Yes, we can as a humanitarian, as you rightly pointed out, in that context, we try to do whatever we can. But we have to preserve our border.
Right. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, expert foreign affairs. Thank you very much for being in the studio for the discussion on this very important issue. We really appreciate your time. We were also joined on Skype by Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan, former President, National Defense University, and also Mr. Hassan Khan, who is expert Afghan affairs. Thank you very much for your time, both of you gentlemen, for being on Views on News today. So as what we understand is that the Afghan Taliban made certain commitments in that Doha peace deal, and they've been failing to keep up to those commitments by allowing the Afghan soil to be used against other countries, especially when it comes to certain incidents which have happened towards Pakistan. But at the same time, there are certain responsibilities and the commitments which were made by the United States in particular, and they have to look into those commitments as well and keep those commitments in order to ensure peace and stability in Afghanistan. With that note, we come to the end of today's Views on News. Until the next one, take good care of yourselves.